So, it's been about 13 days or so since the Japanese release of Persona 5, and after finally finishing the game with the true ending, I just thought about giving, my thoughts on it. And while I'm at it, I guess I may as well frame it as a review. Now, keep in mind that I played the Japanese version, so I can't say much about the English version coming in February, but I don't think anything will be that different apart from you know, the voice acting and the language. So anyway, a bit of a warning. I won't bring up story spoilers except what's already been shown in trailers, so like the prologue and stuff like that. But I will be talking a bit about gameplay mechanics, so there's a small chance it might spoil something for someone. But honestly, I don't think it will. So, since this is a review of sorts, I guess, I'll split into a few parts, like a real game reviewer. So, I'll start with the story. Now, like I said, I won't spoil it, it's just my thoughts about it as a whole. Now, the prologue that you can pretty much see on YouTube and was a bit in the trailers a bit. Now, this confused me a bit because it was in medias res, like in the middle of things. It starts in the middle before eventually rewinding back to the beginning of the game. Um, well, but it certainly was a good way to get me into the story. So there you go. Well, I didn't quite understand how we got to the prologue until it was actually, already reached that point. The initial twist in the story becomes somewhat obvious past the second dungeon. At least it was to me. But after that one twist, more twists followed afterwards, which, well, I didn't really see coming. So I guess I could say the story certainly surprised me in many ways, and I liked it. It's a bit reminiscent of the story from Persona 3 and 4. Pretty much a similar structure. Maybe that's why I like it so much. That's enough about the story. Now comes the really long bit, which is the gameplay. Now, I won't be covering hidden abilities that you gain from raising your cooperation level, which is basically the new word for social links with other characters. You can find those out yourself when you play the game, when it comes out in English, I guess. Unless you're playing the Japanese version, or you plan to import it. Now, before that, we just discussed the difficulty, like real quick. 4 difficulties: safety, easy, normal, hard. Safety lets you instantly revive if the main character dies in battle, so you basically will never game over unless you decide not to revive yourself. And it's pretty much for the people who just want to enjoy the story without the, without having to restart or anything if you die in a dungeon. The rest, I guess you can tell by the name. Me, I played on easy because I feel it's a bit cheap. Well, for me personally, to just revive anytime I want. And I will say I did die twice in this game. First one was because I was careless, and the second one was because I was careless. So basically, don't let your guard down even if you play on easy. So, if you're like me and you just decide to play this game after having already played Persona 3 and or Persona 4, or the Vita version, which is Persona 4 the Golden, you probably have specific expectations when you come into this game, yes? Well, the overall very basic system is the same. You spend time in the game either raising your character's parameters like, kindness, bravery, charm, stuff like that, as well as raising your cooperation rank, which, as I mentioned earlier, is basically social links, buying equipment, items, stuff like that. Or you can enter the dungeon of the game to clear the story. It's the same system like Persona 4, where you have a certain period of time before you get a game over if you don't finish a dungeon on time. And that you can pretty much choose when you want within that period to clear it, as long as it meets the deadline. However, due to story reasons, clearing a dungeon, well, a main dungeon, will require a minimum of at least 2 to 4 days, depending on the dungeon. So I would recommend not putting it off too long. I would say a safety zone of about 5 days. which is would be my recommendation. Now, a mechanic introduced during the first dungeon of this game is the ability to make certain equipment, well, items actually, such as the Go-Ho M, that lets you teleport back to the entrance of a dungeon, the super useful, lock picks to pick locked chests and stuff like that when you're not in the dungeon. However, unlike Persona 3 and 4, the main dungeons are somewhat different. You aren't just looking for a linear path to a staircase leading to the next floor. Although not the main dungeons, you find out about a sub-dungeon in the story, which I care not to spoil. But in that sub-dungeon, yes, you are looking for a linear path to a staircase that leads to lower floors. It's a bit like Tartarus from Persona 3. So yes, that is still there. However, the main dungeons, these are the ones I like, They're basically gigantic maps with multiple areas that sometimes require solving puzzles to continue. Like, if you play Persona 4, you understand what I mean when I say that game-themed dungeon. I think there were like teleporting puzzles in there where you like step on a plate or something and it teleports you around the map and you have to figure out the correct path to the exit. Yeah, something like that, Except it's all sorts of puzzles in this game, in pretty much all the dungeons. And I found them really refreshing. I mean, yes, some were a bit annoying, but they're simple enough that someone like me can complete them, usually on my first or second try. Except the last dungeon, that one took me a bit more time, but still, it's not that hard. The thing about this game is that unlike just running on the floor and whacking shadows from behind and opening doors, I mean, you still do a lot of that, I guess. Walking around, opening doors, attacking shadows. But you can interact with the map by, say, jumping onto shelves, climbing through vents, stealing things, like very specific things, like vases that contain treasure, opening treasure chests and stuff too. And you can hide behind cover to stay hidden from enemies, and you can pretty much jump from cover to cover, which I find pretty cool. And sprinting, you can sprint, however that just makes it easier for enemies to find you. Before I go any further, I would just like to mention that the sub-dungeon just now I talked about is the same as Tartarus in the sense that if you spend too much time on a single floor, the Reaper comes after you. So, watch out. In the main dungeons, there is now a thing called the alert level, which will rise by certain percentages if you are caught by an enemy. As in, if they spot you, they will chase after you, and the alert level instantly rises. If you're hit by them, you get a disadvantage in the battle, and they get to attack first, and stuff like that. Or, if you're fighting normally and they manage to escape from you, not the hold-up escape, more on that later, but if they manage to escape, yes, the more the alert level will rise. And the higher it is, the harder it will be to sneak attack enemies. Now, if the alert's at 0, you can sneak attack them from the back, from the side, or even from the front if you're faster, if you hit them before they notice you. However, if the alert is raised past 0, you can only sneak attack them from the back or when hidden behind cover. Otherwise, you won't get an advantage in the battle, and it will just become a normal battle if you hit them before they hit you. And if they're more alert, obviously they spot you easier. I don't know if they run faster, but I feel that way whenever they hit me at high percentages. Oh, and sometimes due to story reasons, it will rise automatically. But to lower it, either use one of the special items you made during the time in the actual normal world, or defeat enemies without them spotting you. It'll lower by doing those things. And now we get to the combat, yes? Unlike the menu system of Persona 3 and 4, each type of action is mapped out on your controller, like shortcuts. X is defense, circle is attack, square is items, triangle is your persona. In the persona menu, press L1, R1, switch personas when you're the protagonist. Oh, and the personas change instantly when you select them, instead of playing like the small animation in Persona 3 and 4 where it shows you changing them. Using the up button on the D-pad switches between preparing your gun and returning to the normal state. You can shoot the guns now because there's Pierce and Slash in this game. No bash though. This is not Persona 3. L2 brings up the tactical menu. We can, analyze the enemy, although there's a shortcut for that by just pressing L1 in the normal battle menu. Escape, or other tactics that you will gain from cooperation levels with a specific character. Again, I care not to spoil. And also, the tactics, which let you choose if you want to directly control your teammates or let the AI handle them, like Persona 3, although I don't know why you'd want to do that. But hey, some people like that, so, I really like this system. I mean, nothing against the menu system of Persona 3 and 4, but this faster, somewhat more streamlined approach, I actually really like it. Now, another important part. If you manage to get every enemy down, you surround them and all your team members will aim their guns, which is called the hold up. Which you are then given 3 options. You can do an all-out attack, you can cancel out of it, or you can attempt to talk to them. Keep in mind that even if you down all the enemies, you cannot enter hold up if the protagonist is down. Now, you know what all-out attack is and cancelling out of it, I assume. An all-out attack is just a really strong attack that instantly cancels their down state, but deals somewhat huge damage. Now, if you talk to them, you can ask them to give you money, give you items, or you can turn them into a new persona by convincing them via dialogue choices. Now, this system takes the place of that after-battle card shuffle system from previous games, 3 and 4. And I believe talking to the enemies and convincing them to join you was a system from the first 2 Persona games. I think it was, and I'm glad they brought it back. You have to understand your enemy's personality and choose your answers carefully to successfully convince them to give you something or to join you. Again, certain co-op abilities can streamline this this system. Find it out yourself when you play the game. Now, if you talk to them and you convince them, they join you. I like this system. However, I became rather obsessed with successfully convincing certain personas to join me because the fusion system in the Velvet Room is the same as usual. I'm not very good at it. So if I fail to convince them, I'll run around the map even more just to find the same enemy and try to convince them again. Just really annoying for enemies without any weaknesses. Jeez. And then there's, hidden enemies, the equivalent of the golden hand, and stuff like that from Persona 4, except this time you find it by interacting with the environment, breaking vases and stuff like that. The skill cards from Persona 4, the golden returns here, and the network functions, they return, but it works differently here. 3 times a day, if your teammate is taken hostage by the enemy after they get down, or if the enemy tries to escape, you can request the help of another team, well, basically other players on the network, to prevent it from happening. I haven't tested if this means 3 days real life time or 3 in-game or an in-game day. I'd like to think it's an in-game day. So if I try to explain every single new thing in the game in really, really more detail than what I've already talked about, we'll be here for quite a long time, so I'll leave it at this. Let's just say it's an improved version of the previous game with a lot more interactivity, by the player. Puzzles, traversing, not just looking for a staircase, stuff like that, Let's see, story, gameplay. Next would be sound and music, I guess. As you might expect from a Persona game, absolutely amazing music. I loved it. I loved the soundtrack, and I cannot wait for the official soundtrack CD because the limited edition soundtrack did not contain all of the songs. Some particular standout ones that I love would be, I guess, the third dungeon, the fourth, the sixth, and the seventh dungeon. The battle themes are pretty nice too. The boss theme, I don't think it started that great, but it got a lot better about 1 minute in. Basically, for me, the soundtrack is like Persona 3 and 4. Some absolutely phenomenal tracks that I love to death, which, like, Life Will Change and stuff like that. Some I could care less about, that I don't really bother with. Some that start not so great, but get a lot better halfway through. Kind of like the boss theme I was talking about just now. Voice acting? Oh, it's awesome, man. It's a Persona game. But again, this is a Japanese version, so I am hoping they don't screw up the English dub. But considering their past history, I think it's in rather safe hands. I'm not sure if there's anything else worth talking about. So, that's it, I guess. Having finished the game, I can safely say I loved it very, very much. I find it a very worthy successor to the previous Persona games. The English version comes out in February, and while I don't know about the voice acting, I'm sure most of it will stay the same in terms of systems and whatnot. So I can assure you, I guess, it's much more than likely very much worth the wait. And I recommend getting it as soon as it comes out. Thanks for listening this long. Bye bye.